At 0430, a British submarine surfaced off Spain and released a dead officer into the Atlantic. He wore Royal Marine insignia, a briefcase was chained to his wrist, and officers gave him a funeral at sea. The problem was, he had never served a single day. Inside that case were letters aimed at Adolf Hitler, and Europe would move if he believed them. But the real mystery was this: who was the man in the water? The problem was simple and unsolvable. The Allies had just swept through North Africa. Rommel's Afrika Korps was crushed. The Mediterranean was opening up, and every strategist in London, Washington, and Berlin knew what came next. Sicily. The island sat like a stepping stone between North Africa and the Italian mainland. It was the only logical target. It was so obvious that Winston Churchill himself, never a man to mince words, put it bluntly. Everyone but a bloody fool would know that it's Sicily. The problem wasn't taking Sicily. The Allies had the men, the ships, the air cover. The problem was that Hitler knew it was coming, and if the Germans fortified the island with panzer divisions and coastal batteries, the invasion would become a slaughter. The Allies needed a lie so convincing that Adolf Hitler himself would believe it. If Sicily was reinforced, the landing beaches could become a graveyard within hours. They needed Hitler looking anywhere else before the first convoy sailed. In room 13 of the Admiralty, a windowless office choked with cigarette smoke and filing cabinets, that lie took shape. It started with a document written years earlier by Admiral John Godfrey, the Director of Naval Intelligence. The Trout Memo, a sprawling list of deception tactics inspired by fly fishing. The concept was simple: dangle something the enemy wants, and let them swallow it. Item 28 read, "A body carrying misleading documents is floated ashore." Most officers read it and moved on. One did not. Flight Lieutenant Charles Cholmondeley was tall, gangly, and possessed the kind of mind that treated impossible ideas as starting points. An MI5 officer attached to the deception unit, he had been turning item 28 over in his head for months. In January 1943, he brought it to the one man he thought could make it work. Lieutenant Commander Ewan Montague was a barrister in civilian life, a man trained to construct arguments so airtight that judges couldn't find the seams. We find a body. We dress it up. We plant the documents we want the Germans to read. And we drop it where they'll find it. Montague didn't laugh. He asked questions. How would the body be obtained? How would the documents be planted without raising suspicion? How would they ensure the right people found the body and the right enemies read the letters? The plan was presented to the 20 Committee, nicknamed XX as in Double Cross, chaired by Oxford Don John Masterman. The room was skeptical. The Spanish might not cooperate, the body might decompose, the Germans might see through it. Montague dismantled every objection with the patience of a prosecutor building a case. One by one, the doubts fell. Operation Mincemeat was approved. Approval was only phase one. What came next would demand a corpse, forged memories, and flawless timing. They had a name. They had a plan. Now they needed only one more thing: a dead body. Finding a corpse in wartime London was not, strictly speaking, difficult. Finding the right corpse, one that would withstand scrutiny by both Spanish doctors and German intelligence analysts, was something else entirely. Montague approached Bentley Purchas, the coroner of the St. Pancras district. Purchas was a pragmatic man who understood both the science of death and the demands of secrecy. He agreed to help, no questions asked.
I need a body that looks like it drowned, a man in his 30s. No visible injuries, and I need it to disappear from every record.
The body Purchas provided belonged to Glyndŵr Michael, a 34-year-old homeless man from Aberbargode, Wales. He had been found in an abandoned warehouse near King's Cross in January 1943. Dying from phosphorus poisoning, he had swallowed rat poison. He died at St. Pancras Hospital on January 24, 1943. He had no family. No one claimed his body. And critically, phosphorus poisoning caused fluid buildup in the lungs. To a Spanish pathologist performing only a cursory examination, it would look indistinguishable from death by drowning. The entire operation rested on a single assumption, that the Spanish doctor would not look too closely. If the Spanish pathologist looked deeper, weeks of planning would collapse before Berlin ever saw the papers. Now came the hard part. Not the body, the person. Montague and Cholmondeley didn't just need a dead man. They needed a dead man who had lived. A man with a name, a history, a personality so detailed that even the most suspicious German analyst would find nothing wrong. They created Major William Martin, Royal Marines, service number 09560. They gave him a life. Love letters from a fictional fiancée named Pam, composed with input from Hester Leggett, an MI5 secretary. Not official, not stiff. Longing, anxious, real. I do think, dearest, that seeing you so rarely makes it much harder. I want to be with you all the time, not just when the leave comes through. A wallet photograph of Pam, in reality, Jean Leslie, a young MI5 clerk who agreed to pose. She smiled for the camera, not knowing she was becoming the girlfriend of a dead man. 2 ticket stubs for a West End show, an overdue bill from Gives, his tailor. A stern letter from his father disapproving of his engagement. A receipt for a diamond engagement ring. Every item was designed to tell the same story. Major Martin was a real man, living a real life, carrying real documents. And he died in a routine courier flight that went down over the sea. But the personal effects were camouflage. The weapon was in the briefcase. 2 letters, carefully forged, formed the core payload. The first was from General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander, commanding the Allied forces in North Africa. Written in the tone of a personal note between colleagues, it contained strategic references that pointed clearly to 2 invasion targets: Sardinia and Greece, not Sicily. The second letter, from Lord Louis Mountbatten to Admiral Cunningham, was lighter in tone. It included a joke about sardines, a deliberate planted echo of Sardinia.
The letters must read like private correspondence. The moment they look like a strategic briefing, the Germans will know it's a plant.
The final touches were almost absurdly thorough. Dog tags, an identity card, a silver crucifix, Major Martin was Catholic, a set of keys, loose coins, pencil stubs. Even a receipt for a replacement identity card, because what real officer hadn't lost one by now? The body was packed in dry ice inside the steel canister. The label read, "Optical instruments, handle with care." Dry ice bought Major Martin exactly 11 days before decay started rewriting the evidence. Major William Martin, Royal Marines, was ready for duty. He just wasn't alive for it. The canister was driven from London to Scotland in an unmarked van. At Holy Loch, it was loaded aboard HMS Seraph under cover of darkness. The submarine's crew was told nothing. Lieutenant Commander Bill Jewell received his orders in a sealed envelope. Proceed to coordinates off the coast of Huelva, Spain. Release the package. Return without acknowledgement. 11 days in a steel tube. The canister sat in the forward compartment, sweating condensation as the dry ice slowly evaporated. By the 3rd day, the temperature inside the canister had risen above freezing. By the 7th, condensation was pooling on the metal surface. The body inside was decomposing, slowly but measurably. The sweet chemical smell of decay began seeping through the seams. Every hour that passed made it more likely that a Spanish coroner would notice something a drowned man's body shouldn't show. By day 7, Jewell had exactly 4 days left before release. After that, heat and decay could expose Major Martin before Spain ever saw the letters. Time was the enemy, and the Atlantic was not cooperating. Huelva was not chosen at random. The city had a known German intelligence asset, Karl Erich Kuhlenthal, the local Abwehr agent. But Kuhlenthal wasn't just any agent. He was half Jewish. His mother was of Jewish descent. That made him perpetually vulnerable within the Nazi intelligence apparatus. He compensated with zeal, filing lengthy reports, volunteering analysis, and treating every scrap of intelligence as an opportunity to prove his worth.
We needed a German agent who was hungry, someone who wouldn't question a gift. Kuhlenthal was perfect.
British intelligence knew that anything discovered in Huelva would reach Berlin within days.
Absolutely not.
And Kulenthal would make sure Berlin heard about it, loudly, enthusiastically, and without a shred of doubt. The trap was set. If the current pulled west, the body might never reach Huelva. If Spain looked too closely, the lungs, papers, and timing could unravel together. On April 30th, 1943, HMS Seraph surfaced in the pre-dawn darkness. The canister was carried to the deck. The officers gathered. This was the moment that everything, months of planning, fabrication, and morbid attention to detail, came down to a body in the water and a current flowing east. Jewell and his men read from Psalm 39. Lord, let me know mine end, and the number of my days. The body of Major William Martin, Royal Marines, slid into the cold Atlantic. The rubber dinghy followed. The canister was sunk. The submarine dove. Now it was up to the currents, the Spanish, and a German spy who needed a win. The body washed ashore near the mouth of the Rio Tinto on the morning of April 30th, 1943. A local fisherman, Jose Antonio Rey Maria, spotted it floating in the shallow water. He waded in and pulled the body to the sand. The dead man was wearing the uniform of a British Royal Marine officer. His skin was bloated, waterlogged. A briefcase was chained to his left wrist. Spanish naval authorities were contacted. They identified the dead man from his identity card, Major William Martin, Royal Marines, serial number 09560. The British vice consul in Huelva, Francis Hazelden, was notified within hours. He began the diplomatic dance with precision. These documents must be returned immediately. They are the property of His Majesty's government and are of a highly sensitive nature. His urgency was calibrated, enough to look real, not so much that the Spanish would rush. The goal was to give the Abwehr time to photograph everything before the documents were officially returned. Hazelden had only a narrow window to make his concern look urgent, but not urgent enough. If Spain returned the briefcase too quickly, Berlin would never see the forged letters. The plan worked exactly as designed. Kulenthal's agents obtained the briefcase. They carefully opened the sealed envelopes. Each page was photographed. The envelopes were resealed with surgical care, or so they thought. The photographs were transmitted to Berlin. Kulenthal included his own assessment. The documents were genuine and of extreme strategic importance. In Berlin, the intelligence moved quickly. The Abwehr forwarded the material to the OKW, the German Armed Forces High Command. Admiral Karl Donitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, was briefed and adjusted submarine deployments in the Mediterranean. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel reviewed the documents and presented them to Hitler. The forged letters were now on the Führer's desk. Meanwhile, in London, the British waited. When the Spanish finally returned the documents, with apologies and assurances that they had not been tampered with, Montagu's team ran forensic tests. The sealed envelopes had been carefully opened and resealed. But Montagu had left a marker, a fine hair placed beneath the flap of each envelope. Every hair was gone. The bait had been taken. But one risk still remained after the hair vanished from those envelope flaps. If Hitler doubted even one letter, 160,000 Allied troops would land against a far stronger Sicily. A coded telegram was sent to Churchill. 5 words that confirmed everything. The dead man had done his job. Now it was Hitler's turn to make his mistake. In the Führerhauptquartier, the intelligence from Spain arrived with the weight of certainty. The documents were clear. The Allies were planning major operations against Sardinia and Greece. Sicily, a feint, a diversion designed to mask the real targets. Hitler's generals were divided. Some argued that Sicily remained the logical target. The geography demanded it. Others pointed to the captured documents and urged immediate reinforcement of the eastern Mediterranean. Hitler sided with the documents. Reinforce Sardinia. Reinforce Greece. Move the reserves east. The consequences were immediate and massive. Significant armored forces were redeployed from Sicily to the eastern Mediterranean. Additional troops were dispatched to Sardinia. U-boats patrolling the western Mediterranean were redirected east. German High Command strengthened Greek coastal defenses. Hitler had taken a dead man's word over his own general's judgment. Hitler had exactly 10 weeks before the invasion fleet hit Sicily. By then, the net had tightened around defenses he had already pulled away. On the night of July 9, 1943, the largest amphibious invasion in history up to that point launched from North Africa. 160,000 Allied troops, American, British, and Canadian, crossed the Mediterranean under cover of darkness. They stormed the beaches of Sicily. They encountered far less resistance than expected. The armored divisions that should have been waiting on the Sicilian beaches were in Greece. The coastal gun emplacements were undermanned. The Luftwaffe presence was thin. The Italian defenders, demoralized and undersupplied, offered scattered resistance before surrendering in droves. Sicily fell in 38 days of fighting. That was phase 1 of the collapse the Allies wanted. If Italy broke next, southern Europe would open from the inside. The domino effect was immediate. On July 25, 1943, just 15 days into the invasion, the Grand Council of Fascism voted to remove Benito Mussolini from power. He was arrested the same day. By September, Italy had surrendered. The Allies had their first foothold on the European mainland. All because a dead man, a homeless Welshman who had swallowed rat poison in a London warehouse, carried a briefcase full of lies to a Spanish beach. But there was one person in this story who never received credit, because he was never meant to exist. The war ended. The files were sealed. Operation Mincemeat became a footnote in classified archives, known only to the handful of officers who had built Major Martin from nothing. In 1953, Ewan Montague broke the silence. He published a slim book titled The Man Who Never Was, revealing the operation to the public for the first time. It became an international bestseller. A film followed in 1956. Montague became a minor celebrity, the man who had fooled Hitler with a corpse. Charles Cholmondeley, the man who had dreamed up the idea in the first place, lived quietly. He received little public credit. He died in 1982. Montague followed in 1985. Both were buried with full knowledge that their strangest idea had been their greatest contribution to the war. But the book left one question unanswered. Whose body was it? But that answer stayed buried for more than 40 years. The man beneath the uniform remained one final classified casualty. For decades, historians debated. The official line was silence. The identity was classified, a secret within a secret. In the mid-1990s, amateur historian Roger Morgan pieced it together. The body was Glyndwr Michael, a 34-year-old homeless man from Aberbargod, Wales. He had no known family, no friends who came forward, no one who noticed when he disappeared from a London warehouse in January 1943. He died alone, unnamed, poisoned. And then, without his consent, he became Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. He was given a rank, a fiancé, a life story, and a mission that changed the trajectory of the war in Europe. No one attended his funeral except the intelligence officers who turned him into a weapon. For over 50 years, the tombstone in the small cemetery in Huelva read simply, William Martin, born 29th March 1907, died 24th April 1943. A fictional name, a fictional birthday, a fictional man. In 1998, a new inscription was added. That inscription ended 55 years of official fiction at last. What began as deception finally became recognition for Glyndwr Michael himself. He deserved to be honored. He accomplished more in death than most accomplish in a lifetime. The man who died alone in a London warehouse now lies in a sun-dappled Spanish cemetery. Historians visit. Intelligence officers pay their respects. School children learn his name. He never held a rank. He never served a day. He was already dead when his mission began. And yet, no soldier in the Second World War accomplished more with less. Operation Mincemeat proved something that generals rarely admit. That the most powerful weapon in war is not a bomb, a tank, or a battalion. It's a good story, and the willingness to tell it with a straight face, even to the enemy.